evening everybody, and welcome to our free live session for the English language section. So let's get started. Let me share the PPT. Jumble sentence. So it says rearrange the 5 sentences denoted A, B, C, D, E in the proper sequence to make a meaningful paragraph and then answer the questions given below them. Okay. Yes, this was from AIM. So as usual, let's try and figure out what the subject is. Look for repeat words, phrases. Let's identify the topic sentence first. So let's see what clues. There are always logical links and connects, right? To get the sequence right. So let's understand, quickly look at some repeat words and phrases. So if you look at it, so we have pricing, right? And related to that, we also have cost. So these are all repeat words and phrases, and we obviously know that D says this is not a healthy business model, which means that's a nice clue. There's a good clue word for us in sentence D. Can you identify what that clue word is in sentence D? It says this is not a healthy business model, which means one of these sentences is referring or talking about or giving us an example of that business model, right? So this is our clue word here, right? So you can even form links, but let's understand and identify what the topic sentence is. Why? Because based on the repeat words and phrases, we know that the context is surrounding or revolving around pharma pricing, right? It says pharma pricing not only needs to be aligned with the notions of ease of doing business and make in India, but also reckon with the pricing policies and the interests of the senior citizens. So let's quickly look at this as a sequence. So most of you agree that C is the topic sentence because it sets the context, right? It tells me this is what the subject is, boss. We are going to discuss about pricing in this context. So C, yes, is our topic sentence. Pharma pricing, that's our subject, and we've understood that. We also need to look, so if I look at B and A, for example, right? A says the arbitrary pricing of medical products is very exploitative and too serious to be ignored. Now, we need to keep in mind, we're always looking for clue words and phrases, right? From the topic sentence, if I look at pharma pricing, it says, hey, it has to be aligned with the notion, means idea, of ease of doing business and make in India, but also reckon with the pricing policies and the interests of the senior citizens, right? We need to keep this in mind. Now, if I look at, we'll have to look for links now. What can I quickly, so I may be confused. I don't know, after the topic sentence, I don't know which sentence should be the following sequence, right? So I'm going to form links. Like I said, I'm going to focus on the demonstrative pronoun here, this, and figure out where in the context is any sort of business model being discussed at all, right? And if I look, A, no. B, it says an ambitious pricing policy adopted for drugs paved way for huge profits by charging consumers heavily. Okay, so for me, B is the only sentence that is addressing some sort of a policy that was put into place or some sort of a business model that was put into place, which is this: an ambitious pricing policy adopted for drugs paved way for huge profits by charging consumers heavily. So this is the only example out of A, B, and E, which is talking about some sort of a business model that was put in place, right? So there you go. So for me, B, D is a link, right? B addresses the business model where it's saying, hey, huge profits were charged, they were trying to get huge profits by charging consumers heavily. And then it says this is not a healthy business model for a developing country. So let's keep that aside. Now we are only left with A and E. Where do we fit that? So let's look for clue words and keywords, right? If you look at E, it says, remember I said cost of consumers? It is definitely at the cost of consumers. So what is definitely at the cost of consumers? And I need to look for a sentence which is probably addressing that earlier, right? And the only sentence that is talking about it is A. The arbitrary pricing of medical products is very exploitative and too serious to be ignored. So anything that is happening at the cost of consumers, right? The pricing is way too much for them to handle. So which means for me, again, A and E are a link. A and E are a link. Why? Because the only thing that is addressing that there is something happening at the cost of consumers is A. Exploitative, pricing products, exploitative, too serious to be ignored. So now let's unravel the whole thing and see if it makes sense. Okay, I'm saying AE is a link, BD is a link, and then we have our topic sentence C, right? So let's quickly go through this. Slowly, I want you to just pay attention. Let's go. So we're saying pharma pricing not only needs to be aligned with the notion, with the idea of ease of doing business and make in India, but also reckon with the pricing policies and the interests of the senior citizens. Why is that so? Right? Why do we need to make sure that this has to be kept in mind? So what does the pricing policy look like? Right? Remember, you need to ask questions. What does the pricing policy look like? And how do we kind of ensure that this is interconnected or related to the interests of the senior citizens? A brings in that point, right? The arbitrary pricing of medical products is very exploitative. So that's something that addresses the pricing policy and too serious to be ignored. And how is it exploitative? E explains it, right? If a healthcare corporate or hospital is doing very well and adds considerable value to the existing wealth of shareholders, it is definitely at the cost of consumers, which means the consumers are the ones who are getting hit. Why? Because they are being charged unbelievably for the products, right? That's why it says exploitative, the large patient populace, right? So CAE and then cost of consumers, meaning B kind of reiterates the fact and it gives us an example of a business model. How is it at the cost of consumers? Why do you say it's at the cost of consumers? Because they tried this out. This is the business model that they actually went ahead and did. So they said, they're giving us an example. An ambitious pricing policy adopted for drugs paved way for huge profits. See, this huge profits is in line with the first half of E. It says, if a healthcare corporate or hospital is doing very well and adds considerable value to the existing wealth of shareholders, which is nothing but they are making huge profits, boss. They are doing really well. How is that possible? By charging consumers heavily at the cost of consumers. See that? Do you see that connection? They are charging consumers heavily at the cost of consumers. These are your repeat phrases. You'll have to just put two and two together, right? It means the same. How is this happening? So we definitely know that E has a link to B. So if somebody is coming and asking, how are you saying that B should come after E? This is why. There is that link for you clearly, right? So you can't get confused and say CEA. E has a link to B because I just found a phrase that is in line with what the context is saying. Who's making huge profits? If a healthcare corporate, it's right here, if a healthcare corporate or hospital is doing very well, that is the huge profits. How are they doing it? Charging consumers heavily at the cost of consumers, right? There's a direct connection between E and B. Now, so the right sequence is C, A, E, B, D. There is no doubt here. There is a link between A and E, there is a link between E and B, there is a link between B and D. Very logical links, that too. Like you can't even miss it. But you need to pay attention to these clue words and clue phrases. You need to be able to identify and just look at how you can connect them. Yeah? It comes, see, the thing is, I'll tell you, this is not an easy one. This is quite a tricky one because it seems like it's all over the place, but it's actually not. Right? Slightly higher order difficulty level jumble sentences because there's not much pronouns or sequence link words that is helping us out, which means we need to ask questions. We need to identify keywords and ask questions, right? We need to do that. We need to get into the habit of doing that. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult for us to. And a question like this, I'm sure after the topic sentence, most of you will get the sequence wrong or you might skip it. Right? Because it's just all over the place for you. But if you look at it, it has very, very clear logical links. We will not be able to have the kind of time that we are having in the exam to complete a question like this. Why? Because we haven't practiced much using the strategy of questioning, using the strategy or applying the strategy of I for detail. How can I connect these words and phrases? Right? Don't you think? I mean, it can't get any clearer that E and B, there is a link. Yeah? So don't worry about it. Yes, it is complicated, and yes, it will come only with practice, and yes, you will not have time to do a jumble sentence like this in the exam unless you allot at least a minimum of 5 minutes for jumble sentence, which I don't think most of us will have during the time of the exam, right? We always run out of time. That's our problem. That is our concern. So that's okay. But go back, take a look at the explanation. You'll understand the logical sequence, right? So once you get the sequence right, obviously, I always keep saying this, you need to, let me make sure I got the sequence right and I'm not giving you anything incorrect. So CAEBD, right? So when I always say this, keep numbering it, so you get all your full 5 points. Which of the following be the first? C. Second, A. Third, E. Fourth, B. And fifth is D. There you go. You got all your 5 as long as you got the sequence. Thank you guys. Take care. Bye-bye.